All right. Welcome to this final live stream in online data collection and management. It's good seeing many of you here on the stream. If you'd like to turn on your cam, that'll make it a little more interactive. This is your last session, so you need to get most out of this. So use the chat and let me know about the things that are still unclear, because also before the exam I won't be able to answer much. I won't be able to answer any questions anymore. So this is your final chance to do so. Let me also apologize for being silent since like Friday on my phone, on WhatsApp. I've just been busy prepping the exams and I just didn't have time to do anything else than that. So you have the opportunity to ask the questions that you put in the chat after this lecture. So I'll stay on and make sure that all of your questions are solved. All right. But you need to be here for me to be able to solve them. So what's the agenda today? So first of all, I give you a little course summary, and I'm also curious to hear your thoughts on the course. And I would like to give you a couple of ideas on how you can use the skills that you have gathered here in online data collection and management to carry you through your studies and even beyond. Then I have a little note on course evaluation of why I think it's important that you participate in it. And then we go to the exam preparation. For those that haven't seen it, there's an update on the oDCM page. So you can follow this link. By the way, you have access to the slide deck. So just go to week 7. I've added example questions right here, and we're going to go through them so that you can get familiarized with what to expect on the exam. So let's recap, right? So where's this course positioned in the curriculum of marketing analytics here at Tilburg University? So if you think about a typical research workflow, you'll start with like collecting data, trying to get an understanding about a business problem. Then you prepare the data, analyze the data, and then you evaluate it, and you report the results. Write a little app or just produce a paper with like output, or a README with output, whatever you want, right? And much of what we teach here at Tilburg in this program is analysis focused. And we also have a bunch of like business understanding courses where we touch upon substantive stuff. But there's just one other course in which you learn how to collect data, and that's experimental research, right? This course complements experimental research and showing you a completely different way to generate data to answer things like important questions that you care about. So it's at the very, very beginning of anything that you do in terms of a research project. That costs some complications for you because you've been conditioned to always produce a report with like a big research question. But like the focus here was not like zooming in on one like little tiny research question, but like generating data that could be meaningful for many projects. And I see many of you struggle with this at the beginning. But many of you came out of strong and like really identified a broad setting that is interesting to study. So what are my lessons learned if I kind of think about opportunity identification when talking about web scraping? I think one of the key lessons here is that it's important to broaden your horizon. I've seen some of you teams starting immediately to build a scraper. And when I asked, well, why don't you use the publicly available data at that website, which they have already structured for you, the teams were surprised that such data existed, right? But like with any paper probably that you're going to write, you're going to do a literature review. Well, the equivalent of this here in online data collection and management is like to check out what data is available, what data is on Kaggle, like IMDb official data. There's like an IMDb data set section, right? By the way, I didn't discover this. I also first wrote a scraper and then discovered this site exists. But it's important that you're on the lookout for these things to not like replicate that work of others, but like build on the work of others. And then also you've learned how to approach API. So I think Alexander Akaterina, you're the Etsy team, right? Or not? Yeah. So you guys came up with a very creative solution on combining the Etsy, like an Etsy scraper with the Etsy API. I think you've struggled a lot in getting there, but like seeing your team reach that point where you can compare scraping and APIs and know the difference and know when to use what, I think that's a very valuable thing. So, many of you may start out scraping, but hey, check out whether the service has an API, maybe much easier, right? Or, you get more data or richer data. The other thing that we learned is, well, many of you have identified amazing context and you want to say something. So, for example, some of you have focused on one of the biggest problems in the Netherlands right now, which is the housing crisis, which affects all of you that, eventually going to buy or, go on the market to get a house. So that's interesting, right? It's not only because it's personally interesting, but it's like societally relevant. Other teams I've seen working on COVID impact stuff, maybe not directly, but that team of Goodreads.com build a panel data set on how people read. I mean, you could say like, yeah, is that such a big business? And, is it so interesting? But it's a culturally very important activity for human beings to read and to obtain information. So like, to kind of take a look at this closely is really cool, I think. So, and that's one of the benefits of scraping, I think, is that you can really like follow your passion here, and you don't have to use a data set that 100 other researchers have already used. Other things that popped up are, the differences between data aggregators. And I think, especially data aggregators, they're really cool to gather multi-platform data. I'm not sure whether the team here that gets data from Wall Street. Oh, Wouter, I think you're the Wall Street guy, right? I've seen you, but you turned off your cam. Wouter, aren't you the Wall Street guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. So, you're using an aggregating platform to obtain data. What is the platform called again?
It was on Reddit.
Oh, it wasn't Reddit. Oh no, then it wasn't Wall Street. But oh no, sorry, then it wasn't you. It was the Bitcoin people. Like that's the example I want to say. Who's doing the Bitcoin thing?
Yeah, that's us.
That's you, Robin. Ah, good. So Robin, that's a typical data aggregator, right? I mean, you could get prices on the side of the Bitcoins probably, but that aggregator gives you all of the categories in Bitcoins, not only Bitcoin, sorry, cryptocurrencies, not only like one cryptocurrency, but all the categories. And then with each category, you get all of the coins that exist. That's amazingly cool, right? And you would not have been able to build that up from scratch, like going to one currency, going to another currency. You need to rely on aggregators. So it's ideal to get, like I call this multi-platform data, but it could be multi-product data, right? So that's kind of what I learned here. And then biggest platforms are not always the best, right? So maybe you can give an example of this, like one of the teams, maybe you started out getting data from that huge platform, and then you realized, well, it doesn't work or it's too complicated, and you switch to another. We had the Fundas teams, right? Some people wanted to start with Funda, and I told, well, it may be a little difficult to get data from there, and it's the biggest platform. Maybe another platform in the Netherlands gives you more data or better data or easier data, right? And I think you guys switched. I don't know who that was. Funda. You started out with Funda, and then you went to Huizenzoeker, I think. Who's that team?
It's my team.
Yeah, Leslie.
So Funda blocked our data, so we had to scrape.
Funda block your data. Yeah, that's one thing, right? The big platforms, they're very much concerned, but you have like challenging platforms, and like the data that you get, is it, in what extent is it different? Can you describe that?
I think it's similar because Huizenzoeker scrape data from sites such as ja.nl, which is similar to Funda. So
okay, it's similar. It's similar, but easier to get, right? So biggest platforms are not always the best. So look around, and you may even discover data that's like different in a way. So maybe there are also differences. I'm curious to read more about this in your reports, I guess. So let's go to the next lessons learned here. Well, by the way, do you have any other lessons learned about like identifying opportunities? Share them with me and the others. So when I think about the next step in the workflow of collecting web data, it's like assessing data availability. One of the lessons learned here is look out for entities, especially the surprising ones. So can I, like, maybe you need to give me an example, because I'm short on examples here in your situations, right? But like, is there a team that like looked at some data, looked at some websites, and you thought you wanted to get something, but then you ended up getting something else? Like because you discovered something on the website that you didn't know existed? So LOVIs, right? maybe Lovis is a good example. We have a team here. They scrape stuff from this website. Like it's an online shop which looks like Instagram. I don't know. So it's like it's a mix of e-commerce and like influencer stuff. So on that website, I was surprised that you see like how many people are wearing a dress, right? That's a very different like thing. It's actual product usage. It's almost like as if Amazon.com reported how many people bought a product. That's amazingly cool. It's like a dependent variable, right? I mean, what do we care about more in marketing than sales, right? So, and that doesn't exist on the big platform. So, and to me, it's been a surprise that they report this. So that's super cool, right? If I had studied online reviews on lovis.com, that would, to me, not be so exciting, right? Because I mean, okay, it's a different shop, it's a different product category, but then that's it, right? But you have like extremely unique data in this project, which is a proxy for sales. Something that that's cool. Look out for variables like that you could potentially identify. And you've maybe also learned about the time availability aspect, right? That some of the data looks like very promising, but it's only data that you can gather in real time to be able to collect this. I don't know. We have a flight team here, right? I think Lorenzo, you're the flight guy, right? So is the data available historically on your flight website, or is it live?
No, not historically. So
exactly. So you learn about this difference, right? And then when you think about, oh, there's like a website where I can get like flight delays, like because you're trained to think of, oh, my professor gives me a data set and here I go, you think you can go back in time, but you just can't because the website is not built that way, right? So that way you have to construct your scraper to build a panel data set because it's so much cooler analyzing panel data. So, spend time mapping your navigation path. I think only 2 teams submitted a video on mapping the navigation path, but I think it's a very, very, very useful exercise to do because it makes it like super and crystal clear on how you want to go from www.lovis.com to the actual data that you want to generate. And you don't have to submit a video for your project, but on top of your Jupyter notebook or Python script, or in that README, spend some time explaining how you navigate on that website. It is this single one thing that makes web script, well, not the single one thing, but it is one of the aspects that makes web scraping completely different from other data collection methods because you have to simulate user behavior. It's almost like you have to automate your browser to pretend it's a person to navigate that site. But when you work with experimental data, what you have to do is you have to have a survey and people fill out that survey. If you're working with observational data from firms, you just extract it from their SQL database. There's no simulation of user behavior with any other aspects and data sources in marketing. So spend some time thinking this through. What's the next one? Is a real-time data collection required? That's like related to the point I've just discussed with Lorenzo, right? So like if a data doesn't provide historical data or provides data with inaccurate timestamps, like posted 3 months ago is not a good timestamp. Like the 14th of October, that's a good timestamp. But like, some of those websites, they disguise timestamps. So that requires you to invest in a real-time data collection. And then finally, are there any algorithmic biases present and can you exert control? Maybe you can generate an example on this, like teams, have you identified any algorithmic bias in your projects that you circumvented by setting filters in a particular way or?
Well, yeah, we do. We have YouTube, so it's, constantly working as an algorithm.
Exactly, but what are your seeds, Jeroen?
Well, we haven't used a seed at the moment.
But no, you do have a seed. You probably have a category that you focus on, right?
We have a search title, or we have a query that we are looking for.
Yeah, but the query was some game or something, or
no? It was Fruity Loops.
Yeah, Fruity Loops. Yeah, it was. So, but Fruity Loops. Okay, but think that through. Your seed is Fruity Loops. Okay, It's one seed, but it's a seed. And then what videos pop up when you exert that search control? Have you reflected upon that?
Well, if we use Fruity Loops tutorials, we get mainly tutorials. But if we
You
don't
get
have it-
tutorials, but which ones? Do you get the ones produced in the Netherlands because you're running a scraper in the Netherlands? Do you get US videos?
we get both. We get from every country that we.
Yeah. Okay, so you get everything, but do you get the most popular videos?
Yeah.
Exactly. So that bias that you have here is, just be aware of it. You're getting tutorial videos, which is great, but you're getting the most popular tutorial videos. Now think about if you were to study cultural diversity, probably you would have to make the case that you get into the long tail. Because if you want to study diversity, but you only look at the biggest group in a society, you will not tell anything about diversity, right? You see what I mean?
Yeah, true.
So
but
it depends on recognizing these limitations to the data that you get, acknowledge them so that people who will use this data set in the future, they are aware of this. I mean, or at least acknowledge this, right? Yeah, I try to study cultural diversity, but I just studied it with the most popular videos that Jeroen extracted, right? But that's
Okay.
good, but you need to be aware of it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So let's go on. Like, now we got a data source, we got to identify, and we know what is on the website or what is on the API. Now let's evaluate whether it fits our research purpose and whether we can actually afford getting the data. This is probably a copy of bullet points, and I have copied the wrong ones. So let me think about a couple of points that I wanted to make here. So I think one of my key lessons was the calculation of technical sample sizes, like feasible sample sizes. So I remember a couple of discussions with teams that said, like, yeah, do you really want me to get 1 million products? And then I was, well, calculate the feasible sample size for your project, or calculate how long it will take for you to get the data if you go for 1 million products. And it was like, half a year. And then it's kind of, oh yeah, we can't do that, right? So it's very, very important that you're able to reflect upon that, because unlike any other data collection method in marketing, you don't have such constraints. Like, we don't want to be blocked, right? So we need to be slow and gentle. Reviewers of your studies or people in business, they can tell, yeah, I want 1 million products, right? But then you can argument and say, well, look, it's just technically impossible, or give me some money so I can run it on multiple computers, right? It's very, very important to reflect on that. I'll quickly pause my screen. So the other lessons learned that I wanted to go over are that the choice of seeds may invalidate your research design or inhibit generalizability. I think I discussed this just now with like Jeroen's API, right? If we want to study, the YouTube stuff, right? If we want to study diversity, focusing on the top 1,000 videos is probably not going to cut it. So we have to go deeper if we can, right? Sampling is complex. I've talked about this computation of, a feasible sample size. By the way, guys, it's not only calculation of the feasible sample size. I can also just give you a sample size, and you need to tell me about the extraction frequency that I need to adhere to, right? You can like rearrange this formula in many ways. And then again, if you're not so much into formulas, think through what I'm doing here with this formula. You don't have to like know this formula if you can build it up from scratch. It's just like logical thinking, right? So like, okay, one request takes like 2 seconds. Okay, if I have to make 60 requests to get my data, how long is it going to take me, right? 120 seconds. Well, if I have 2 computers, I can run it in parallel. So I'm cutting it down back to 60 seconds. It's like just these simple mechanics that you can like try to challenge yourself on calculating this. And then I haven't spent so much time talking about this, but some people are taking data of a platform, but it may also be interesting to get metadata on the platform. So one example, right? I use Spotify data a lot, but what I also capture is the blog of Spotify, because the Spotify blog gives me information about what is happening on the platform while I'm conducting my study. And in taking copies of this, I'll be able to like kind of identify important things that just happened during my data collection. So, I mean, you didn't do this now. Maybe some of you are putting some PDFs or some screenshots of the website, so that's already interesting. But it's good to think also about like what are other relevant things in the ecosystem of IMDb or Lovies or whatever to monitor, to tell people about the historical context in which your data collection took place. What are the lessons learned from the technical extraction plan and prototyping your stuff? Well, first of all, prototyping is very, very important. So many of you had a first scraper running in like no time, but then you hit boundaries of extracting particular data sources or particular like targets on your website. So you need to prototype and then move your prototype also in like something that can work in production. You know, it's easy maybe to run a scraper by clicking, okay, run, and, you know, run. But you know, when you run the entire notebook, like somebody who will collect this data, actually, you may have to build in some timing functions because the website just hasn't been loaded yet, right? So, and these are like all problems that you encounter when you prototype your stuff. Another really, really big thing, and one of the key things that I will change for the next edition of this course, is actually the difference between requests and Beautiful Soup and Selenium. I saw many teams use Selenium in the end because it's way better to deal with the type of websites that you're interested in. Beautiful Soup is great, but you know, it just is difficult maybe to click on elements. And it's actually nice to see Chrome next to your code and actually can observe like what's happening on the site. So I would like to, at least that's what I'm thinking about, is making Selenium my preferred choice for the next edition of this course. And then just saying, well, if you want to speed things up and you're like really confident, just use Beautiful Soup without like opening Chrome. That's like one of the things I'm actually curious to hear thoughts on. We talked about extraction methodology, like, you know, by extracting stuff by class names or tag names. And I think like classes are quite stable, and that's my preferred choice always. And then as you were porting your code into, you know, production code, that is code that I can run, you started to write functions, because like, you don't want to repeat stuff over and over and over again, but like wrapping stuff in functions makes your code easier to read and easier to reuse. And while you were working on your prototype script, many of you teams also came up with more feasible navigation paths. You thought you were going to get data in one way, but then you were like, ooh, that's really difficult to get. Maybe I'll do it another way. A key ingredient in your reports is also at least a brief discussion on legal and ethical concerns. And we have not spent much time discussing those, but they're very valuable tips in the Fields of Gold paper that I encourage you to take a look at. So one of the things is, for example, make sure to have a scientific purpose, right? So if you're collecting data as a thesis student and the scientific purpose is questionable, that's not good, because especially if you are part of the research institutions, use that, because it may protect you against some of the legal issues concerned with scraping. And then scale and scope. Some of you got blocked by data providers because the timing limit that you've used was, well, maybe you just didn't use a timing and sleeping function, right? So think about the scale and scope. Do you really need to get all data? Well, you know, sometimes a small sample will be sufficient, which is also good, because the company, we need to respect the company also, right? They are interested in protecting their trade secret in a way, right? And if you're taking a full copy of their database, it's hard to argue that you haven't like kind of taken all of their stuff, right? So if you're working with a small sample, firms will be less inclined to like, you know, be against what you do, right? Because then they see it's a research point and it's not so important, and it's anonymized anyway, so you won't really hurt them in any way. Also, these have serious implications with regard to the running time of your stuff, because you don't want to run stuff for half a year like one of the teams proposed initially. The location of the data provider and users are also quite important. In general terms, firms in the US or overseas, they're more lenient than European companies, for example, in being scraped, which has to do with the strict regulations that we have here in place in the European Union. So think about like, what are good websites to scrape, and then incorporate that decision in your choices. sometimes, especially when you take this into a serious scraping efforts for like your business in the future, talk to these people. Maybe you can strike up a collaboration to make sure that you can officially get that data. Maybe you scrape first and you build a prototype and then convince the firm that you're actually doing something valuable here for them too, right? So seek out synergies. And then also, at least for researchers, so if you want to go into the research domain, be aware that any degree of commercialization of the data that you get is not good, right? So you should make sure that the data you collect for research purposes is just used for research purposes, and that you don't follow a second agenda to commercialize anything out of this, because that will get you in trouble with the firm for good reasons, right? So be aware to split these things. If you are into the business of commercializing this, seek out cooperations. Let me also tell you that one of the, several of the biggest companies that we know today have scraped data without asking for that permission, right? Google Books, for example, Google News, this is all built on scraping technology. They just crawl websites and, show the news on their own website. And, there have been lawsuits, rightfully so that newspaper publishers get compensated for the news that Google shows, right? But they started out just not doing this. What did it end up? I think it's a good business model that we don't have to buy all of the newspapers in the world, but that we get snippets. But rightfully so, Google has to pay for this, right? So it's a thin line to walk between like not doing things because it's not officially allowed versus like exploring new business options. And I don't have the answer for you guys here. It just doesn't exist. But like be aware of this as you're navigating and using this technology in the future. I have 2 more slides on lessons learned. So what are my lessons learned of collecting and monitoring data? Scheduling is quite handy. And we have building blocks on this on Tilburg Signs Up. So don't like wake up at 12 at midnight to like start your scraper, but like just schedule it. And, before you schedule it at midnight, maybe you just want to schedule it at 3 p.m. where you're still on your computer and see whether it actually works, right? And then another thing, why do you want to collect stuff at 12 o'clock at midnight anyways? I mean, you're supposed to be, well, I don't know, maybe some of you are not in bed, right? But like I'm generally in bed at 12 at midnight. So it's a very bad time to start up scrapers because you don't see what's happening, right? So you could also do it during the day. So it doesn't mean that data is only valid if you collect it at midnight. Passwords is important. I've seen so many secret API keys. So put them in your environment variables and make sure your code is tidy and free from secrets. Common code and make it understandable for others. Like at the last meeting, I've seen many of you notebook users still have cryptic notebooks without like instructions or anything. So at least use a minimum amount of instructions so that somebody who comes after you and wants to run and understand this code understands it actually, right? And something that I spent a lot of time discussing with a few teams was the 2 big scraping philosophies, right? Do you parse on the fly? So you extract data and immediately put it into a CSV file, or do you only parse later? So for example, with APIs, you first gather all the data and write it in a JSON file. You have a second notebook, which takes that JSON data and spits it out into a CSV file. Especially for APIs, I think it's extremely important to separate these things. Why is that? Well, APIs like eventually show you data, may show you data that you didn't intend to collect. Even with websites, by the way, that's the case. So for example, I gave this example to one team, right? When Twitter set out first, they had a limit of 140 characters. And you could only post pictures, right? Today you can post videos, and I don't even know whether there's still a restriction. Maybe that restriction is 280 characters, or even it's lifted, I'm not sure. So the thing is that the videos are saved in a different way in a tweet, and the text object, the text node in the JSON object still is a condensed version. It's only 140 characters because that's how it was built. But there, I think, is a node, it's called text extended, and that has the entire tweet, right? Suppose you would have parsed on the fly, then you would never had gotten tweets longer than 140 characters, and you would not have been able to get any videos from it. Although like suddenly videos appeared on Twitter. But in storing the raw JSON data, you can actually reconstruct it, because then you're like, there was an update to Twitter. Oh, now they have videos. Oh, let me look in the JSON data. Is it there? Yes, it's there. Oh, let me parse it, right? That's why it's so important to follow the second scraping philosophy in many cases is first get the data, then parse. And then what are the lessons learned about documentation? Well, just start from a template, like a README. Start from one of my repositories in which I've documented data. You know, don't invent things, reinvent things. Just like build on something that has been done before. Generate plots and spot errors in the collection. Look at the phenomena of interest in your data. Is it in there? Is it not in there? And think of a data supplier rather than just like narrowly focusing on one research question. All right, that's a lot of tips and a lot of reflection on this. So let us try to pause here a little and let's try to look at that. What do you think are the strongest limitations of web scraping and APIs? Come on, I don't even know what bullets are going to come up. You can preview, but maybe you can generate ideas on your own first. What do you think is a limitation? My active guys, you're the only one I can look at. Those 4 brave camera users. What do you think are like limitations? And Jeroen, obviously, because Jeroen is there still, right, Jeroen?
Yes, I am.
Good. You still don't have a camera? Oh, were you?
Well, my internet is really bad at the moment,
Okay.
so
Not a problem. Jeroen, what do you think is a limitation of using web scraping and APIs?
I think, for example, with certain comments or something, you don't
What does that
know,
mean?
like a Twitter comment, you don't know if it's positive or negative sometimes. I think the information that you collect might be, how do you say it? Just black and white. You don't know what's behind it.
No, actually, you don't. Many of those. Okay, I need to note this down just a second because this is good as I'm like reworking my paper on web scraping. So let me just open up my notes. Let me see. I need to take notes. So I'll just put it in your Zoom chat. So I think it's about it's about variable operationalization, right? Is difficult with scraping, right? So you want to study valence of reviews, but all you observe is text. And then on a survey or experiment, you can manipulate the sentiment straightforwardly, and that's your measurement of the sentiment. But in online scraping, this variable is just not there yet. So you have to make it yourself. So it's much more difficult, I think, to operationalize some of the variables that marketers care about. Does that make sense, Johan? I'm trying to translate.
Yeah, that was basically the thing that I wanted to say.
Yeah, exactly.
The survey, you get the emotion.
Exactly. And that could be the case with other variables too. Yeah. What are other limitations of scraping and APIs?
Maybe the difference between working with APIs and not with raw data is that you have to work with the assumption that someone has made.
Yes, exactly. I'm putting this in the chat too. So, and like one of the papers that obviously academics have thought about this, and there's a really cool paper. It's called A Primer on Theory-Driven Web Scraping, and I'll put that one in the chat right now. Check access, of course. Oh, how I like. Okay, so here's a cool thing. Do you know libkey? Libkey.io. You can just paste the DOI. Like whenever you're hitting boundaries, just paste the DOI. Oh, invalidate input. Oh, so maybe it's just this. And you need to lock in once with your organization, and then you have access. It's basically the legal version of Sci-Hub. I don't know whether you ever heard about Sci-Hub, but there we go. Article in full text. Here we go. It's typically super fast, but there we go. Okay, now I got it. PDF full text. So what this does, so Lorenzo, what you said is you have to work with the assumptions that somebody else have. This paper allows you to think through the assumptions of why something sits on the internet. So let me look on whether they have a good table on this. Well, maybe guidelines. Yeah. So why does this website exist? That's like helpful to think about what data is there. Like, why does this Bitcoin site exist? Like, so this cryptocurrency site, it's for traders, right? So they have an incentive to display all of the currencies. If the website was owned by a cryptocurrency, there could be biases because maybe that cryptocurrency secretly has the agenda of like only pushing their currency at the expense of others, right? So think through that. Who owns the data on the website? Who has access to the website? Why would somebody visit the website? That's an extremely important thing, right? So suppose, like, I use data from Last.fm, other people use data from Goodreads, right? So why do people visit that site? Well, that's people who want to share their reading or listening behavior, but these people are not like the normal people of like readers. Like, I'm a book reader, but I never like put my readings online on goodreads.com. So you have sample selection here, right? So it's like thinking through these questions help you like know why the data is there. And it's like, it has so many, like, it gives me a lot of inspiration on like what to do with the data and what I cannot do with the data, right? So another thing that I have noted down is web data entails modeling challenges. Like, we don't have an experiment. We don't have a clean survey design. Our measurement may be diluted, the operationalization that I chatted about with Jeroen. So this is not covered in this course, but it is important as you deal with the data. By the way, the Nobel Prize in economics was given to Guido Imbens and Angrist. Let me see, Nobel Prize with a Z, I guess. Guido Imbens, there we go. So what was it given on? It's given on for their methodological contributions of the analysis of causal relationships. This probably is the moment where you're closest in like mindset to the winners of the Nobel Prize in economics this year, because that is exactly the thing. Our data doesn't come from an experiment. So, but we still want to use it to identify causal effects. And the winners of this year's prize, they have exactly studied this, how to do this. Read their work. They're not that old. They're like, I don't know, 55, whatever. So like, read on their work. And like, Mostly Harmless Econometrics is a book by the winners of this prize. It's a public, I think it was Angrist, right? Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, Joshua Angrist. That's the guy. So like, check out that book, because it's like a real world. I mean, it feels like reading a novel, but they teach you about how to identify causal effects with observational data. You know, it's really, really cool. I'll put it in the chat, and probably you'll get a free access if you go to your Tilburg site, Mostly Harmless. If lipsearch.uvt.nl is also good. When I see you, Lorenzo, noting stuff down. So let me try Mostly Harmless Econometrics. And if you search here, I think you probably get a link to an ebook that you can read for free. There we go, view ebook, right? So use this to your advantage. It's amazing. So web data just can't give you all, right? Sometimes you need collaboration. It didn't happen this year, but many times that I work with students, they want to collect clickstream data. So they want to know which user clicked on a product. And then upon deeper reflection, you think like, well, that's entirely impossible using web scraping, because that's internal data. Like if you are on Amazon.com, you don't see any user behavior. You just see the website that users see when they shop. So you don't know who clicked on a particular item. But many people think of, oh, web scraping, it's a website. Okay, now I want to know who has clicked on a particular, you just can't, right? If you want that data, you need to collaborate with the firm. Legal and ethical issues are not fully explored yet. let alone acknowledged when we publish our work. So that's one of these areas in which we need way more clarity. All right, let's think about potential applications of web scraping. You guys could start today to collect data for your master thesis. Don't do it at the beginning of like writing your master thesis, because it took you 2 months to write your scrapers and learn all that. You won't be able to get a production ready scraper in like a short amount of time. You can build a prototype, and yes, that will be on the exam too, but like writing something in production just takes time. Talk to potential thesis advisors already now, because many of us colleagues, we are thinking about what topics to put online by November, like in a month from now, and you need to subscribe to these topics. So if you want to work on something that you really got passionate about, contact potential advisors. And it's not that I have to supervise it, right? Because there are other people that do this in the department, and we don't put names when we post topics. But if you want to study goodreads.com, make sure one of your professors puts it up as a topic, as in like identify the impact of COVID on consumption of books, movies, genre, you know, whatever. We'll make it as broad as such, but then you can apply on these topics and like follow down that route that you started out in this course. So talk to us about this, talk to other people, tell them about your skills, and, you know, make sure you can use that in your thesis. We're turning it a little bit here. So tell my colleagues that you have these skills. Many of them don't know, but many of them love you if you tell them that you have these skills, because it's valuable. So start up now, use later is also another good strategy. Then those PhD students and research master students in this class invest into data collections. Everything that I have done in papers started out with a crazy idea of like, oh, that website is cool, let me get some data. And then later on, it evolved into proper research papers. Maybe some of you are future PhD students, right? So if you're passionate about that project that you started here or anything else, start collecting some data in the good way. Huh? So read Fields of Gold on how you do it right. Don't just reinvent the wheels, build on the shoulders of what others have done. Data has always been very crucial to what I study. So I'm actually happy I always got this opportunity to follow my passion with web scraping and APIs. There are many opportunities academically, right? Scout emerging phenomena. I think last year Clubhouse was really big. I think by now it has died again. Study phenomena that otherwise can't be captured, for example, unobtrusively. That means like, reading behavior is something that people typically don't share, but then there's Goodreads, so we now can finally get it. You can study more diverse populations, moving beyond, you know, white, educated, high income, and I don't know what these other letters stand for, right? But if you Google it, you'll find the definition, right? It's so boring to only study like people in the US, which many of the academic papers that I know do, right? Like move out, like, you know, study populations in Asia, in Africa, make sure that our knowledge translates to all kinds of people, all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, right? That's kind of our mission here. And I think many of you are way more open about like diversity than, let's say, my generation has been when we were like sitting in the study hall. So, you know, that's, I think, one of the golden opportunities of your generation. So just make this come true, please. And then we can generate realistic stimuli. Oh, well, that information is in the paper if you're interested in it. There are more academic opportunities from how we study phenomenon. We can build real-time scraping collections rather than just like getting historical data. Not many people do that because they don't have the skills. So, you know, if we have those skills and you have them, invest in them. And I think I'm running a little bit out of steam here. So much of that discussion is also in the Fields of Gold paper. So maybe one thing that I want to zoom in is to access algorithms. So right now you have spent a lot of time using APIs to get data from a website, and that also uses this API to display information. But many times APIs out there exist that can enrich data, like the Google Cloud Vision API. You send pictures and you get sentiments back. You send a picture and you get the number of faces and their smiling expressions back, right? you send a picture and Google notices what brand logo is on it. So, you can use APIs not only to gather data, which sits on a site, but you can use it to augment your data, to like make your data more intelligent, right? Jeroen, you said like, it's so difficult to get like sentiment scores in my data set with text. Well, there are APIs that give you sentiment scores. So just like connect them to your data collection, and then you have properly validated sentiment scores. I do mention the other things real quick. Sometimes people are running field experiments, like they actually pay 100 people to participate in their experiment. You can connect that with APIs. So for example, I could say like, okay, 50 people in my class, they get a 10 euro voucher for Netflix, and 10 other people get 10 euros, so 50 other people get 10 euros cash, and I'll tell them you need to buy a subscription, but I don't care which subscription you buy. Then I require all of you to register on this site called tracked.tv, which allows you to submit all of your consumption of all of the movie streaming services that you do to the service. And I built a scraper, an API actually. I use the API of Track to monitor your consumption behavior. And now I will study how diverse your consumption is, because I know which target group you belong to, A or B, right? You get 10 euros for Netflix, so you're bound to stay with Netflix, versus I give you the choice of going, and then I observe how your consumption changes. That is combining, let's say, the field experiments or experiments that probably most of you were, most students and thesis, they do an experiment with surveys, right? But you can connect it to API stuff to make it like really, really awesome, right? So see these opportunities. I think there are amazing opportunities. So talk to me if you have ideas about this, because I'm also very interested in having a few of those things covered as thesis topics. And then you can build your own research API. All right, just read up on this, and there's a link that you can click. In essence, this is a paper that not only studies something, but these researchers have built their own API, and firms will, use this API, and they can collect research data. It's extremely cool, but read up on this in the paper. What are the next steps in this course? Actually, you have deserved a break. So what I'll do is I'll go on blank now, and we'll go on a break, and we'll continue at 9:50 with the exam prep and your final questions. All right. So thanks so much until now, and I'll see you after the break.